Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our IT Services Benchmark webinar, our traditional ITO revenue streams making way for cloud, highlighting the results from our recent Professional IT Services Benchmark. My name is Allison Crawford, and I will be your host for today's session. In this webinar, we'll focus on how adoption of cloud-centered business models and emerging technologies are helping vendors offset slowing ITO revenue growth. Before I pass this over to Elitsa, Ramunas, and Patrick, there are a few logistics I'd like to cover. First, we're recording today's session and posting it on our YouTube site, TBRI channel. We encourage you to visit our channel to watch this presentation or any of the others that we've posted. Second, we'd like to hear your opinions and thoughts on the materials we're presenting. Please send any questions or comments to the Q&A or chat function. Elitsa, Ramunas, and Patrick will address them at the end of the presentation. Or if you'd like to set up a client inquiry for more detailed discussion, please reach out directly to the analyst at the end of the webinar to set up that conversation. Third, we'll send out the slides to everyone registered for today's webcast within 24 hours of the conclusion of the webinar. You can also find these slides, as well as other thought leadership pieces, webinar decks, and commentaries on SlideShare at www.slideshare.net/TBR_market_insight, and we'll share all the social media links with you again at the end of the presentation. Now, let me introduce Analyst Elitsa Bakalova, Senior Analyst Ramunas Svarcas, and Senior Analyst Patrick Heffernan from our Professional Services team here at TBR. Elitsa has been covering IBM, Capgemini, Atos, and T-Systems for the past 8 years, as well as the global delivery market landscape and management consulting industry. Ramunas has been covering the services market for over 15 years and manages many of our custom service engagements. Patrick is a State Department and Deloitte alumni and is the lead on our management consulting benchmark. With their inputs, the professional services team has guided countless clients to improve margins and understand new opportunities to expand their reach. And with that, let me hand this over to Ramunas.
Thank you, Allison. So before we get started into our presentation, just a quick overview. I'm on the next slide, slide 3 here. TBR analyzes a number of companies in the IT arena. And for 33 of these companies, we prepare periodic reports. For those that actually release earnings statements, we leverage those earnings statements and then examine the strategies of how these firms are performing in regards to the marketplace and to their own strategies. Are they succeeding or not succeeding? So this report compares and contrasts the various firms, identifying the laggards and leaders in the marketplace. And today we're going to examine specifically the IT outsourcing area for today's report. But we do cover all the other professional services areas within the report as well. We know that the complexity of the IT services market necessitates an ongoing examination of how companies are reacting to change. The change in the respective company performances tells us who is really winning and losing. And our depth in understanding these companies helps understand and answer the question, why are they winning and losing? Our clients leverage this report to identify how they're performing against the market in general and versus specific competitors. This is one of our most popular reports, with nearly 20 clients today purchasing the report, as well as accompanying Excel workbook that contains the data that drives the information that we present in the report. Today, we'll be providing highlights from the report focusing on the IT outsources market, and specifically try and understand, is IT outsourcing giving way to cloud computing? With that, I'm going to turn over the microphone to Elitsa to begin the discussion and start us off on the journey of understanding what trends are influencing IT outsourcing. Elitsa?
Thank you, Ramunas. Through its ongoing research of the IT services industry, TBR discovered that ITO revenue growth is decelerating. And this trend has started in the beginning of 2012. You will ask yourselves, what are the reasons for ITO revenue slowdown, and are traditional ITO revenue streams making way for cloud? Will adoption of cloud-centric business models and emerging technologies help vendors offset the decelerating ITO revenue growth? TBR will address these key questions during the presentation, and we'll cover 3 key topics, including ITO performance, cloud adoption, and industry change. Let's start with slide 5, with the topic of ITO performance. ITO revenue growth began to decelerate in 1Q12 and has been in the low single digits for the past 5 quarters. There are 2 main reasons. Number 1, clients invest in shorter-term tactical projects. And number 2, clients migrate legacy IT to cloud. Let's start the analysis by moving on to slide 6. It shows how ITO performs relative to the rest of the IT service lines. All IT services are showing decelerating average trailing 12-month growth when compared to the growth during the year-ago quarter. The graph on this slide represents global ITO revenues for the 31 vendors included in the IT services vendor benchmark and shows average trailing 12-month year-to-year revenue growth for the 4 service lines covered in the report. ITO was the smallest loser in terms of year-to-year growth when compared to the rest of the outsourcing service lines, including BPO and applications outsourcing. ITO average TTM revenue growth declined 220 basis points year-to-year. However, the service line growth of 1.3% trailed behind all service lines represented on this graph, and we expect this trend to remain in 4Q13. On the other hand, BPO was the biggest loser with average TTM revenue growth down 390 basis points year-to-year. However, the BPO growth of 6% was still the highest when compared to the rest of the service lines, driven by technology and analytics-enabled solutions. The last point I want to make on this slide is that consulting and SI revenue decelerated the least by 50 basis points year-to-year to 3% in 4Q13, supported by consulting-related activities for cloud, mobility, analytics, and technologies. On slide 7, let's take a look at how ITO performs relative to the other IT services. Overall, over a period of 9 quarters, ITO, which we show in light blue line, consistently performed below overall IT services revenue, which we present in the green line. The ITO revenue growth deceleration began in 1Q12 and has been in the low single digits since 3Q12. The main reasons that drove this deceleration include completion of large deals signed in the early 2000s, which resulted in large contract awards running for as long as 10 years, price pressures in the services segment, customer demand for shorter deal cycles, and vendors quoting renewals with potentially lower annual values, as well as inclusion and shift to cloud provision services in traditional ITO deals. On slide 8, I'm going to provide a vendor example and focus on HP's ITO service line. The firm's trailing 12-month ITO revenue, shown in the green line, declined 7% year-to-year, which is below the 1.3% TTM average for the 31 firms in the benchmark. While the integration of HP's technology services segment into its enterprise group better aligns ITO and support services with the technologies they manage and support, HP's ITO performance was challenged by a shift in demand from outsourcing to cloud hosting engagements with lower initial spend. Additionally, the shift in customer demand to smaller contracts with shorter cycle drove down ITO revenue growth for the firm. Now I'd like to turn it over to Ramunas, who will cover the trends regarding cloud computing and the effect it has on the ITO service line. Ramunas?
Thank you. So as you see from what Elitsa just pointed out, there are companies that are actually experiencing pretty dramatic decline in their IT outsourcing revenue. Certainly the big players that have historically played in this space are the ones in basically seeing this kind of decline in their revenues in that area. And this contracting growth from that perspective is definitely a problem. The key thing that we really need to recognize, and I think everybody does, and you know, across the board, when you look at all the literature out there in the marketplace on a daily basis, everybody's come to the conclusion that cloud adoption and cloud is here to stay. Cloud computing is definitely changing what various IT service vendor firms have to do in the marketplace, necessitating them to change. And really, when we examine their revenue streams, we're seeing some of this change occurring. And there we are seeing success from that perspective in certain areas, whereas in other areas of the overall IT services market, there are declines occurring. We know that cloud is the mechanism that's providing infrastructure and software to be utilized by customers to solve their business challenges and provide positive outcomes. And because of that, vendors need to change and really move towards an outcome-focused environment as opposed to an IT change, cost reduction environment. So one of the areas where we're seeing a lot of traction is in managed private cloud. In general, managed services is growing quite dramatically, and managed private cloud is really one of the key areas where we're seeing a lot of change. And this management of the needs of the cloud environment is really being driven because clients need to understand and or better serve their own internal and external challenges. Cloud success has been because it's been reducing capital costs for customers and substituting them for with variable operating costs, and that enables them to move resources and dedicate them to business building. And this whole trend has been really engendered, and we're seeing different adoption of cloud computing across the various regions in the world. Many of the large enterprise clients in the U.S. were the first to market with cloud, leveraging it and using it. The trend is emerging in Europe because of a lot of pent-up demand right now, whereas the APAC market literally just took off once they understood what cloud could do, and is really skipping many of the steps that some of the larger firms with legacy infrastructure have to deal with in terms of making decisions of whether or not to move to the cloud market. Management of the overall infrastructure is critical to generate the expected cost savings. The next slide really takes a look a little bit more detail and kind of shows where the shining light here is in IT outsourcing. Within the TBR nomenclature and the way we break up the market, managed services is part of our IT outsourcing component. And as you're already seeing, the chart here depicts again the same data with slightly different bends in terms of we've actually broken out managed services revenues related to cloud and or what is happening from that perspective. The bars indicate the share of managed services that is a part of the overall IT outsourcing market. And the two lines, the top line really depicts the growth rate for managed services, growing at a very healthy clip of 30% plus. Overall IT outsourcing obviously is in the 1% range. So what's happening is that effectively in the marketplace there's a shift of what you're actually providing from an outsourcing perspective. The revenue stream is not a direct one-to-one replacement. Managed services is an ongoing engagement. Many firms are really deciding not to host or rebuild their cloud infrastructures, but purchase those resources. Subsequently, there are additional areas where firms continue to have success, especially in the consulting side and the advisory side and the implementation side. At the same time, large firms have embarked on cloud. They do have many times sufficient IT departments to run their whole environment, but even these firms are finding that there's a skill shortage in managing their cloud environment. So they're turning the operations over to the various professional services firms and systems integrators to help them run their cloud environment. The real other key driver here is that the complexity of the market continues to just grow geometrically, exponentially, let's put it even. number of software as a service offerings, as well as infrastructure and platform as a service offerings, continues to expand. And as a result, it's a very complex market, and vendors have to recognize that and have to change with that complexity and be able to accommodate and help clients in meeting the challenges that clients are seeing. As a consequence, the clients are turning to the vendors because they themselves cannot build out those skill sets as quickly as they would like to. So managed services is driving the market, and as well, it's not the initial impact is that in fact it's going to take a larger share. As scale builds out for those managed services for the various vendors, you do see that outsourcing revenues will recover. Certainly not at the same rate as they have in the past in terms of actual growth, but it is going to be a replacement. But the replacement cycle which is occurring now is definitely decreasing the overall growth in IT outsourcing in total. So when we say that skill sets are weak, there's a need for various professional services vendors to fill that void. What are clients actually looking for? And we go to the next slide. Really what we're seeing is that a working knowledge of cloud-related issues, as well as governance and risk consulting and understanding those issues, is a key element that's driving various clients to turn to professional services firms. Certainly that knowledge and skill set that they're providing has a big play in the front end of engagements from a consulting standpoint. And yet, the other half of the equation is that you really need to know the whole end-to-end environment. If you know the end-to-end environment, and actually if you can provide many components of the end-to-end environment through various as-a-service offerings, that puts you in the best position in the marketplace to succeed in today's changing environment. We've recently conducted a study, and the data that's being presented on this slide is from our cloud program, where we actually not only focus on the various vendors from just a pure cloud perspective, but also interview end users in the enterprise space that are adopting cloud or not adopting, and understanding the reasons why. One of the pieces of this puzzle is obviously who are the key vendors that are really seeing a lot of traction from from a professional services standpoint. And not surprisingly, the big players are appearing at the top line: IBM, HP, Accenture, the ones that have been focused on IT services and providing professional services to the marketplace for a long time. What's interesting is we're seeing that there's some software vendors that are appearing on the marketplace. And this is part of the whole challenge within the cloud market, that there is skills that are needed to successfully implement cloud solutions for clients. The vendors themselves, in some cases, especially in high-risk scenarios where the workloads they're using are very high risk, are actually pulling in the software and vendors to help them. They don't feel comfortable enough that the traditional systems integrators have all the knowledge necessary, and they believe the software vendors can do a much better job. On the same token, from an implementation standpoint and an understanding of what your software can do, the software vendors are recognizing that they have to also be at the table when cloud is being discussed, when it's being outsourced or an environment being built for an outsourcing scenario. So they are at the table, and they are themselves pushing forward. There are instances where many of the major software vendors have seen bad experiences because they weren't implemented correctly, or the software that was being suggested was not really the appropriate piece of software that would work for the client. So the overall market is recognizing that to really serve cloud, because of the complexity and the number of offerings that are being generated out there in the market, partnerships really are a key element of the equation. And likewise, as I mentioned earlier, end-to-end, being able to provide end-to-end services, looking at the whole infrastructure stack, and then being able to understand how all the pieces are going to work together at the specific clients, organization and then understanding the cloud issues behind that are critical aspects that need to be addressed. Some vendors are doing a very good job at this. Others are trying to make inroads in terms of becoming good at this. Yet not everybody's going to be able to do everything. And certainly that starts to move towards a differentiated market where certain vendors are going to be more specialists in one area versus another. One of the other things that we're seeing is changing is that there are emerging technologies that are really having a play in the overall outsourcing arena and with regards to IT outsourcing. And they're really having an impact in terms of what needs to be done by the various professional services vendors in terms of addressing the new emerging technologies and embedding them and bringing them to bear within their cloud portfolios. So these emerging technologies are really changing the nature of solutions that the clients are providing. And I'm going to let Patrick get into those emerging technologies. Patrick?
Excellent. Thank you, Ramunas. So what I'm going to do now is talk a bit about the strategies that the IT services vendors are using in the face of everything that Elitsa and Ramunas just pointed out. So if we roll to the next slide, you're going to see a timeline. And it's pretty simplistic, but it gets the point across that vendors are building, partnering, rolling out new offerings around emerging technologies, and at the same time, clients are expecting more and greater things. So we hear repeatedly from IT services vendors that clients' demands are evolving as rapidly as the technology itself. So yes, clients want IT services that solve business problems. That's the root of it. But they now know more about the possibilities of digital and analytics and mobility. So they want the latest and greatest, which leads the vendors to the point of making decisions about how to meet that changing demand. And you do it in two ways. You invest or you reorganize, or as you'll see on the next slide, you acquire, you hire, or you consolidate. So if we go to slide 15, and you'll see it there. There we go. So that's basically it, acquire, hire, or consolidate. I'm going to go into detail, a bit of detail on all three of these strategies, but it's important to note they're fluid, they're not exclusive, and more importantly, these different strategies play out differently across different time frames, different metrics. So one thing hopefully you can take away from this webinar overall is a good feel of what to look for in 2014. What are the signposts, what are the metrics that'll let you know which ones of these strategies are working and for which companies. So let's flip to the next slide and get more specific about acquisitions. This list is clearly not comprehensive, but it is illustrative of what happened in 2013. And if you just skim down that and take a quick glance, you're going to see cloud, digital, analytics, mobility. Those are all the key solutions that were scooped up. And if you dive deeper into those acquisitions, you'll see they were done for all the reasons that companies normally acquire: to gain market share, to gain new customers, to expand one's offerings, to gain intellectual property. And the catch, though, and to sort of tie back to that timeline we saw before, is that now in 2013 and in 2014, acquisitions that center on or are sort of rooted in emerging technologies are increasingly more expensive. Every vendor wants to get into this game, wants to improve, wants to do all those things that I mentioned before about why you acquire. So that ratchets up the cost of making acquisitions. I'm going to talk, and IBM has got 3 of them on there, so I'm going to talk about IBM in a little more detail shortly. But we take a quick look at CSC's purchase of Service Mesh, about a $300 million purchase, cloud orchestration, deployment management, well-proven technologies, established client base, and most importantly, it's a key piece to expanding CSC's cloud portfolio. So for a reason to acquire, we have it right there. Expand CSC's offerings and of course, get the IP that goes along with it. So it's exactly the kind of acquisition that should pay off quickly. So we're going to be watching that in 2014, see how CSC's cloud revenues and their client base expands. And in the words of one of our analysts that covers CSC and cloud in particular, expecting immediate traction from Service Mesh. So that's what acquisitions can do. So if we move to the The next strategy for tackling this disruption in the marketplace, you'll see it's hire and retain the right people. And the challenge, of course, is who are the right people? Getting that mix right. You need expertise, you need experience, you need folks at the right salary, you need the right volume. Can you adequately staff up engagements, particularly when the IT services that are being delivered are new, different, evolving? So we can see here some vendors are taking a volume approach, TCS, 50,000 new hires, and looking to hire more. Others are taking more of a, let's hire the experienced folks to develop deep consultative engagements, to have these longer relationship building kind of engagements. They're more expensive. It's a different kind of model, and so the challenge here is balancing that out. So whether you use a Infosys-like model or an IBM-like model or a Capgemini-like model, you have to have the right strategy in this constantly evolving and disrupted environment. So again, looking into 2014, we're going to be assessing and measuring how well that strategy pays out, both in terms of performance and then what adjustments vendors need to make to their business model to take advantage of that strategy. So let's consider then the third strategy, and that's reorganization. And you'll see on the slide, these are the two, yep, we can jump down to 18, that'd be good. Yep, here we go. The two big ones there, two bellwethers in this industry, and IBM and Accenture. I can't say strongly enough how important the moves by these two companies were in 2013 when we look to 2014. So with IBM, you'll see their digital front office, interactive experience, and global cloud footprint. The key point there is new customers, R&D, and globalness, for lack of a better word. What do I mean? IBM digital front office is all about getting new customers, new revenue streams. And tied with IBM interactive experience, it's leveraging all that R&D, the truly industry-leading R&D. And then you have the global cloud footprint, and there you have IBM leveraging its globalness. This is not reorganization in the traditional sense, but it's important, and it's on here, and it's part of their strategy because it's really a constantly evolving organization, and it meets the new demands that are there from emerging technologies at the same time that it leverages IBM's existing strengths. So you shift that to Accenture, taking a different approach, and you could say strategy and digital. Okay, this is the most simplistic thing possible. All business decisions fall under strategy, and all the emerging technologies fall under digital, and you could even argue, well, those emerging technologies will eventually supplant the old ones. And you'd be right, it kind of is that simple. Accenture, and what makes it, of course, if it was that simple, this wouldn't be much of a presentation. What makes it interesting is the way that Accenture views its clients and views its competitors, and why Accenture Digital and Accenture Strategy then reflect that. So Accenture sees its clients as looking for consulting services around business decisions, whether that's supply chain, organization, optimal IT architecture to get into technology consulting. Internally, clients don't separate those issues from running the business. So Accenture Strategy pulls together all of that consulting capability and experience and expertise and says, okay, this is how we're going to help you across your entire business, rather than trying to have one part of Accenture competing with McKinsey for strategy-centric work, and then you'd have another part of Accenture competing with, say, KPMG for operations management consulting work. Accenture, through Accenture Strategy, pulls all of this into one organization, puts one organization forward. Exactly mirroring that is Accenture Digital, where the company recognizes these emerging technologies, as much as they permeate the entire IT services landscape right now and the entire consulting world, they still need room to develop and mature. They still need, call it incubation space, call it R&D space, IP space, and there's probably going to be, and there are, a different set of management tools and metrics internally in order to roll that stuff out, to train the right people, to hire the right people. All that goes around, all the complications and necessary changes that go around these emerging technologies in terms of having them as part of your business. So understanding all that and understanding that digital analytics mobility, they're all tightly intertwined, and the lines between them are gray at best. So Accenture pulls them all together. So again, they go forward to the client with one organization. Here is Accenture Digital, which captures analytics, mobility, big data, all of those, both buzzwords and honestly real emerging technologies. So to kind of wrap this up then, we've looked at strategic decisions that a lot of these vendors made in 2013, alliances, acquisitions, staffing, reorg, and what we need to do is, and what we do is consider how that positions them to handle changes in the marketplace and with their competitors. And then the next step, of course, is what are the metrics that we use to determine whether they are a success or a failure in the spot. And that gets right back to what Elitsa and Ramunas presented at the top of this. So I'll hand it over now to Ramunas to give you a sense of, you got a quick glance of it, the issues that we're going to be looking to in 2014.
Thank you, Patrick. So, I mean, what we've covered here is really the fact that, IT outsourcing is changing. In fact, all outsourcing is going to change as a result of cloud. This change is taking place. It's been creating a very complex environment, and different vendors are moving in different directions. We gave a couple of examples. The last two firms that Patrick just talked about in terms of IBM and Accenture, we know their internal structures are very different. IBM has a huge, legacy infrastructure stack, huge software portfolio, while Accenture is partner-centric. They work very closely with all their partners. So they're both addressing the marketplace differently, and certainly something we're going to keep close eye on to see who's going to really succeed or grow more rapidly, which approach is actually working better. We also believe that the change doesn't stop there. Industry verticals are coming to the forefront as a key element as part of the overall equation for firms. If you're in a given industry vertical and you're not the hot sole owner of that industry vertical, there are challenges out there in the marketplace because others are coming in and trying to swipe your business. The first industry vertical we're going to be looking at is financial services. Really trying to understand how firms are differentiating themselves within that marketplace. We believe that it has been one of the hot areas, but also one of the leading areas from an emerging standpoint. Many of the financial firms are many times first to market with new technologies, so they're leveraging much of what's happening in the marketplace. Their concerns, security, not surprisingly when you're talking about finances, so we'll be looking at that as well. And finally, getting back to the overall digital equation. I mean, when you say digital, it's a new form. It's really the new form of data, and subsequently we see it being encompassing all the emerging technologies. It's really how you're analyzing that new form of information and how it's coming across. We know that analytics and mobility are very closely tied, and we're going to really be trying to understand, who's doing the best job right now, why, and or who may be doing the best job in the future. So with that, that's what we're going to be covering in our next series of reports on the various vendors. And certainly we'll have some summary of that again in our next IT services vendor benchmark. But I'll open it up to questions regarding today's presentation.
Great, thanks guys, and thanks to those of you. We have 2 questions that are in queue right now, so if anyone has any additional questions, now is the time to send them through. The first question we have, and I'll let you guys duke it out as to who gets to answer first. Can you provide more details around the main trends in the ITO industry? What conditions are the ITO industry facing?
Patrick, do you want to handle that, or do you want me to?
Ramunas, I'll let you take the first stab, and then I'll either contradict or follow up on what you say.
Well, I mean, one of the things we are seeing is that, and it manifests itself in the revenue streams for IT outsourcing, is that there's a shift in the deal structures for IT outsourcing. The deals are shorter, flexible, and because they're cloud deployed, they're a little bit different in nature than what we've seen in the past. Customers are now become familiar with cloud computing, And, they're expecting cost savings. And, the cost savings is really engaging in the cloud computing model in one way, shape, or form or another. At the same token, however, there are a number of firms that are stoic and tend to believe that they need to still protect and run some of their workloads by themselves in a private environment. So private clouds have become prominent. But they don't expect you to take 2 years to build a private cloud. They want it quickly. They want it in place. They expect it in place. They believe you can leverage, infrastructure services and software as a service as parts and elements of that, be it if it runs on their cloud or not. The overall understanding of that has already occurred by the vendor, and it needs to be put in place quickly. So the whole implementation cycle and bringing it up to bear is much shorter. And as a consequence, the expectation is if it takes shorter time, it should cost me a little bit less than the old way that we used to do it, where we had long engagements that were drawn out. I think there's also a pressure on the sales of cloud in terms of, again, speed is really the key, and because the deals are shorter, you have to keep coming back to the client in terms of reviewing what else can be moved. We know that a number of clients have embarked in cloud in pieces, so therefore it's now upselling those clients from that perspective. So that certainly is going on likewise in the marketplace. The last half of the equation is really automation in terms of IT outsourcing. It's a key element. It provides the additional cost savings for the client, and likewise, it's a much more efficient way for vendors to provide their outsourced services. So it's an element where everybody is very focused on how to automate. We're seeing some signs for some of the vendors that it is succeeding already. We've heard a lot out there in the marketplace as a reason of many firms kind of reducing their headcount as opposed to growing at stupendous rates as they did in the pre-recession period. And part and parcel, that's because of automation and firms figuring out how to automate some of the procedures, processes, solutions, and provide and pass along some of that cost savings to their prospective customers. It's a long answer.
Patrick?
Patrick, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, the only thing I would add is just how many times you said expectations and what clients expect, and it's not it's not just speed and reliability, and it's not just delivery of exactly what they want, but it's cheaper, and that's where it's going to get trickiest going forward. Being able to deliver all that and do it at the price or at the cost that the clients are expecting, and that's where I think we start to have the pressure on the business models and the pressure on the industry as a whole.
Okay. The next question we had come through: when you exclude the fear of losing ITO business to cloud computing, shifting to shorter deal lengths creates enough challenges to ITO providers. If all other aspects remained constant, what will ITO vendors have to do to overcome the pressures from cutting off deal cycle length?
I can take this question. So I think there's two main aspects, and the first aspect is that the vendors have to strip the selling costs from the model. So Ramunas alluded in his answer about pressure on the sales motion, and this trickles into my topic. So vendors have to cut nearly, I think, in half their cost structures when they develop sales proposals in order to keep their selling expenses in line. And if they don't, then the SG&A expenses, especially the sales part of the expenses, will lead to margin erosion. And we've seen, and through our research, have seen many firms struggling with this aspect. The second item is that vendors will have to overcome more challenging staffing scenarios. And here, I'm talking about staff utilization. it will be more challenging, and it already is more challenging when resources have to be mapped on the shorter deal cycles. And this utilization challenge intensifies when it's mapped against the cloud delivery models. So ultimately, this will lead to cannibalization of some of the ITO opportunities that vendors are seeing and are coming for renewal.
Ramunas, Patrick, you want to weigh in or move on to the next question?
I think Elitsa answered that one very well, yeah.
Okay. So the next question we had come through is, do you see a simple replacement of old type revenues by cloud, or will the cake get even bigger due to the nature of an agile cloud?
This is Patrick. I'll take a stab at this, and then I will definitely defer to Ramunas for some thoughts on this as well. But, so, will the cake get even bigger? The cake has continued to get bigger, despite all the disruptions we've seen in the past. And you know, when you look at the CNSI aspect of it, the consulting and systems integration part, you could see that over the long term, that business still grows as customers. You know, they don't. It's not that they don't want consulting anymore, it's that they want it for something new. There are new business issues that come up, there are new technologies that come up, there are new opportunities. So the question, I think, is more, well, the answer is, yeah, the cake's going to get bigger. The question becomes who's going to still be at the table eating cake. I know I'm absolutely butchering that metaphor by saying that, but what I'm trying to say is, yeah, some of the vendors that we're looking at now are not going to see their piece of cake get larger, and others will, and I think that's just sort of a natural flow of business. But in terms of simple revenue replacement, I don't see that happening. Ramunas, am I wrong on that?
No, I think I agree, and I think what's happening is that many of the emerging technologies, I mean, and we're talking about analytics and mobility, have created a whole new realm for work from an outsourcing standpoint, as well as from a consulting and systems integration standpoint. We're seeing the growth in business process outsourcing continuing to be quite healthy. And the fact of the matter is that it is a commoditized business. Yet when you add a layer of value onto that, you apply analytics to all that information that's flowing back and forth from many of the business processes that are being handled by external vendors. There is a value to that. If you can find and create solutions for your customers as a result of that data flowing through you, that's very important and critical. And that hasn't been in place in the past. I mean, it was basically just let's execute the process and walk away. The same thing is occurring on the applications outsourcing side. Everybody wants to differentiate themselves from everybody else. Yes, there are a number of software as a service applications out there that can be either brought in and purchased under a private cloud environment, or actually just rented out there in the public cloud. But do they always do everything the client wants? Yes, they're the cheapest solution possible out there. But again, people want to be unique and differentiate themselves and create differentiation out in the marketplace when they're dealing with their consumers. That provides an opportunity for applications outsourcing. So you got new areas where work is going to evolve and develop, and I think that's really what's happening in the marketplace. Is it a huge, much bigger pie or cake? Is it the same size, or is it a little bit smaller? Hard to say at this stage of the game. I think what may happen is that we're going to see a lot of firms that may have not been as involved in outsourcing, and when I say firms, I mean clients involved in outsourcing may be looking at it as a viable exercise. Especially those firms that are coming up from the bottom and are starting out small. They actually are short-circuiting some of the issues that large firms have had to deal with cloud in terms of having legacy infrastructures. Case in point is the overall firms coming out of the APAC region who have jumped in the cloud head over heels. They're using cloud computing. They're leveraging it because they have not had legacy infrastructures that they had to basically shelved and put away, but could jump right into it. So, yeah, the cake is getting bigger, especially from that perspective, because they're getting into the market much more rapidly than other firms that have been in place for a while.
Okay.
So with that, why don't we take on the next question?
Okay, we have one more question in queue, so if anyone has any additional questions, please send them through now. The last question we have, guys, is consulting and SI showed the least revenue deceleration. What are the main drivers of this, and what are your expectations in 2014?
So I think Patrick began to answer that question earlier. I mean, we're seeing a crossover from what's happening with cloud in terms of, there's still a need for consulting and advisory services, and, as well as implementation and integration. Many firms, while they understand what cloud can do, cannot, basically evaluate every possible software offering, every possible infrastructure offering, and make decisions. And as a consequence, you turn to a consultant to help you. So therefore, it is still the avenue of entry for many firms to get into clients. And those firms that, Zach mentioned that earlier, that are successful in that step of the engagement and do have the solution stack behind it to provide and meet many of the needs that the client wants, are going to be in the best position. And you can approach that either by developing the resources in-house or leveraging partners to provide some of those resources. And we're really seeing two groups of vendors out there in the marketplace, those that are very focused on developing internal resources, organically growing their IP that they can leverage in the cloud market and then present it to their clients through a consulting engagement and bring it on board and bring the client into that outsourcing engagement with that IP. And other firms that are really leveraging their partner base and going that route just the same way, but sharing that effort. And at the same token, they deflect some of the costs of developing IP and the solutions to their partners from that perspective. So there's two avenues into the market and success in the market. At this point, we haven't seen which one's going to win or lose. In certain areas of the marketplace, in certain industry verticals, and in certain areas, some firms are doing better than others. And we'll keep an eye on that and as part of our IT benchmark to make sure we understand which ones are the leaders and laggards as we go forwards.
Okay. We had another question come through. You mentioned IBM and Accenture restructuring. How do you see HP's structure in relation?
That's an interesting question because, HP is now one of the few that actually has the whole stack. With IBM relinquishing their server business and somewhat backing away from their hardware-centric business, they've become a services and software vendor. Accenture is really a strategy and software vendor. HP has it all, and I think the one challenge possibly for HP is making sure that message gets out to all their clients. HP has historically been known, for its ability to support the IT infrastructure. Now it must really bring it all together, especially under cloud, in terms of being able to handle the outcomes that IT infrastructure needs to deliver, and really focus from that perspective that they have themselves restructured and changed their organization, removed some of the top layers of the organization to make things more efficiently. And it's really just a matter of communicating throughout the organization in terms of being able to provide a complete solution to clients. And I think they're really moving in the right direction. And they do have the advantage that now they are one of the few that has the complete stack in place.
Okay. We had another question come through. What are the biggest capability gaps that IT services players are facing as they try to capture the opportunities from these new growth vectors?
I would say the biggest capability gap is people. Having, and Ramunas and Elitsa, definitely correct me if I'm wrong here, but my sense is that having people that have that combination of expertise in a technology that's rapidly developing, that have experience in applying that technology to specific business issues, and then having that vertical experience as well, and of course not being crazy expensive and being able to fund enough of them. My sense is it's people, but Ramunas and Elitsa, I'd ask you guys what you think.
I think, and I want to add to yours, is consulting expertise is key. And you know, if I want to parallel IBM, Accenture, and HP, IBM and Accenture's both business and IT consulting expertise help them address key growth trends and emerging technologies, and you know, enter into outsourcing opportunities and implementation opportunities as well. Technology expertise is the next one. For some of the vendors, we see a lot of vendors partnering with technology providers to add in technology capabilities. And you know, I can mention the European vendors like Capgemini and Atos, partnering with a lot of the cloud providers to expand their cloud capabilities. And the last one is industry expertise. We have a lot of vendors adjusting their offerings to accommodate specific industry needs. So that's a key trend. Ramunas, did you want to add?
I think the other half of the equation is not just having the people, but having the right balance of people. Certainly, you know, you can have a very strong consulting capability, but when you then move down the chain and you start to implement and deliver a solution, the cost of delivering that solution can be prohibitive for a client if you do not have a balanced workforce where some of the elements of that solution can be delivered with low-cost resources, whereas other elements can be delivered with much more expensive resources, but you know, they also deliver much more value to the solution. So the balancing act is almost as important as having the right people in the right place at the right time.
Okay. So we do not have any further questions in queue. So with that, I'm going to take the time to wrap up the presentation. I want to thank everyone who attended today and thank the analysts for their presentation. As I mentioned, I was going to share all the social media links with you, so I do encourage everyone who's here to follow Patrick, Ramunas, and Elitsa, as well as TBR at the Twitter handles listed here, as well as joining the conversation on SlideShare and YouTube. As we mentioned, we are sending out both the slide deck as well as the URL to YouTube to be able to rewatch this presentation. So we do encourage you to share this presentation with colleagues if you find value in that. And if you'd like to set up additional conversations with the analysts, please do so. On your way out of the webinar, there is a short 3-question survey. How valuable was the presentation? How good were the presenters? And if there's any other open-ended comments or feedback you'd like to give us, what we're doing well, what we're not doing well, areas of research you'd like to see us take more scrutiny to, anything that you want to provide to us will be taken into consideration, and we are using your feedback to change our presentations quarter to quarter, so we do appreciate anything that you do share with us. I'm going to leave the session open for another minute or two just in case there's any last-minute questions or comments, or anyone would like to set up a conversation with any of the analysts. You can send those through now. Otherwise, we will send out the deck to everyone by tomorrow. And be on the lookout for additional webinar invitations for both the services presentations that we do every quarter, as well as other cloud-related webinars. We've had a couple this week. If you want to look for those on YouTube, please do so. And if you have any questions, please reach out to us. So thanks again, everyone, for your day. I hope that you're not getting as snowed in as we are here in the New Hampshire area, and we look forward to talking with you all again soon. Have a great afternoon.